Hello and welcome. So, in today's module that we're going to be running through, just give me a moment to get this set up. Okay, perfect. So, we're going to be talking about sleep. Now, sleep is probably one of the most neglected of the foundational principles of health. I can't overemphasize how important sleep is. Like if you think about when you're doing your workouts and your exercise, we're breaking the body down, and the body, it, it, it that hormetic stress they call it, causes the body to have to build. So when you stress it and you're breaking the body down, like the muscles and things like that, the body has to supercompensate and build back stronger. Now, if you don't get adequate rest and sleep, then that's the actual time that you're getting the benefits from your workout during that recovery phase. If you don't get adequate sleep, then you're going to be breaking yourself down, breaking yourself down, breaking yourself down. So I can't overemphasize how important sleep is. It truly is one of the foundational principles of health, alongside with eating good quality food, drinking lots of water, managing your stress levels, moving, exercising your body. Sleep is up there, and there's a lot of health experts, many of which I respect a lot, natural health experts. Some of them even believe that sleep is more important than exercise or diet. Okay, that's a little bit controversial, but it does tell you, it does give you a bit of an indication as to how important sleep is. And in all honesty, sleep, if you look at the statistics of the average level of sleep over the last 100 years, with the advent of technology, and we can look at the last 25 years in particular. I was having a chat with my kids, telling them that, I grew up in an age where we didn't have computers, we didn't have phones, we didn't have the internet. And in the last 25 years, we've gone from internet, social media, to phones, to smartphones, to, just having our attention pulled in lots of different areas, and our sleep has correspondingly gone down over the years I believe, in direct relation to a lot of the use of technology. So we're going to talk about that and some of the implications of that and have a little bit of a deeper dive. So good sleep. Yeah, the main ways that it does help us is that it helps to recover the body. So as we age, we take a little bit longer to recover. We don't bounce back from hard workouts or injuries as quickly. So it's even more important to get not only enough sleep, but good quality sleep. And it helps to recover the mind. When we don't get adequate sleep, it's sort of like I always, visualize it like, imagine if you've ever seen like a movie where you've got like an older style lawyer, and they've got files on their desk, papers everywhere, all over the place, and it's just chaos. When we go to sleep, it's like our body and our mind sort of files away and like does a system defrag, and it sorts out this memory goes here and this thought goes here, and it all organizes the way that our brains function. So our memory is enhanced, we're sharper, we have better cognitive function. And as I said, our body recovers and restores. And a lot of the functions, like our detoxification system pathways, get upregulated during the night when we're not using energy to move and digest food and do other things. So it's our immune system does a lot of regulation during the evening. So there's a lot of, or the sleep time, I should say. So there's a lot of important functions that happen in your body when you're sleeping. It has a major impact on staying lean or getting lean if you're not lean already. So it has a significant impact on our appetite and our satiety levels, which we'll have a little bit of a deeper dive into shortly. Massively affects energy. We all know that what it's like if you have a really poor quality sleep or not enough sleep, you just don't have much get up and go. And as we've talked about in our previous chats, energy is the currency of life. And without enough energy, we don't do what we need to do to have the best version of us every day. And focus, mental focus. So again, that where focus goes, energy flows. So when we're not focused on the things that are important to us and are going to move the needle forwards in our lives, then we're not going to have the best quality lives that we can possibly have. So not enough sleep, it does make it harder to lose body fat and have a healthy weight. And even keep muscle. If we're not getting enough sleep, that's where we do our muscle building and recovery. It can be quite catabolic to our muscles, so muscle destructive. And as we age, we naturally lose muscle anyway. After the decades of 40, 50, 60, 70, it just magnifies how much muscle mass that we lose. And we have to do everything in our power to maintain that muscle mass. It's called sarcopenia, the loss of muscle. A lot of people know like osteoporosis and osteopenia where we're losing bone mineral mass, but sarcopenia is super important as well, that loss of muscle, because it affects our ability to function. Our balance, our stability, our injury prevention, our strength to do things. So that sleep and muscle link is super important. As I mentioned before, it disrupts our hormones. I mentioned about the hunger and the appetite regulation. That's very much tied into the hormones that get affected by lack of sleep. And it accelerates our aging. So again, if you can imagine, you look at someone that gets really restful sleep and they wake up and they just look well rested, and you look at someone that's chronically sleep deprived, and you can see it in their skin, they're more wrinkly, they have bags under their eyes. You can just tell they're not functioning at their optimal level that they could be. And there's a huge body of research showing that there is many, many chronic diseases that are tied into as a secondary sort of ripple effect of not getting adequate rest, recovery, and sleep. As I mentioned, it's super important for our immune system. So when we're not getting enough sleep, it increases a hormone called ghrelin. And there's been a number of studies done in relation to this. And ghrelin is the hormone that triggers hunger. So if you imagine you're not getting enough sleep, your hunger and your appetite and your cravings, and they've found that cravings in particular for high sugar, high carbohydrate foods, that drive for hunger for those types of foods is a lot higher. And what they hypothesize is that if you imagine, like if you have a lack of sleep and you're tired, you need some sort of pick-me-up. Like imagine a coffee. Most people have a coffee if they feel, low on energy. And because coffee is a stimulant, it's like a drug that gives you like an artificial energy boost, same as sugar does. So that ghrelin, that increased ghrelin, tends to manifest in people having more sweet cravings. So if you are having a lot of sweet cravings and carbohydrate cravings, have a look at your sleep. It could be tied to that. It also reduces leptin. So leptin is a very important hormone. We hear a lot about insulin, but leptin's very important as well. And it is directly tied into satiety. So when we feel like we've been satisfied from what we've eaten. So if we don't have adequate leptin levels, then we're not going to feel full and satisfied from a meal as quickly. So we will tend to overeat. And again, the researchers hypothesize that that's directly tied into your body just trying to get extra energy from food because it is so tired from not getting adequate rest and recovery. So the research is less than 7 hours of good quality sleep. I personally always try for 8, and in all honesty, it is an individual thing. There are certain people that can thrive off a bit less than that sleep. Some people need more than that sleep. Like anything, there's never a one size fits all um, prescription that's going to work for everyone. You have to become intuitive with your own body, listen to the signs and symptoms that it tells you. So I find 8 hours, I try and aim for 8 hours. I definitely am in bed with my eyes shut for 8 hours. Whether I'm sleeping the whole time, that's a different story, but I definitely give my body the opportunity to do that. So, if you're reading a book or something, that even if you're laying in bed, that doesn't count as sleep. If you're watching telly in bed, which I highly wouldn't recommend, they say there's only two things that you should really, well, yeah, two main things that you should really only do in bed, which is sleep and sex. Reading a book, is sort of on the, on the border. I think that if you're reading a book with, low lighting, and I have, light very much affects our sleep quality, and we'll talk about that later. But I have like a little reading light, and it's from a company. I think they're called Blue Lights. I'll have to have a think about it. If anyone wants the company, I can look it up and tell you guys. But it's a company, Blue Light Blocker or something like that. It's a little light that has it's an amber color light. So we'll talk about light spectrums and how that affects the pineal gland in the brain. But the amber color, that orangey color light. So if you imagine like when the sun goes down and it's sort of orangey color, it's a different spectrum of light, and it affects the brain and your sleep hormones based on the color. So that's why I have one of those little reading lights. I don't have the big light on. And I feel that that's okay for reading a book in night because it's sort of a slow restorative type activity. Cravings. So we mentioned it before. Sleep loss increases parts of the brain that are associated with reward. So we tend to have cravings for sweeter foods, as we mentioned before, and it's your body, that drive is going to hormonally prime you to seek out foods higher in calories, higher in sugar, higher in carbs, to give you that little bit of a pep up. So it can make it really hard when you're trying to follow a plan like we are, and even beyond that, like, just for optimal health long term, and making it easier on yourself to be able to stick with healthy eating patterns. It is extremely important to get adequate sleep and not be sleep deprived. So activity levels, there's a bit of a two-way relationship when it comes to sleep. So a lack of sleep hampers exercise performance. One of my old jiu-jitsu coaches, he was like a competitive athlete that competed in the worlds and all sorts of things like that. So he was very on point with monitoring his sleep, and he had like a sleep monitor band that he wore at all times and measured a lot of different things. But he would get like a sleep score, and he would definitely tell me that whenever his sleep was low, his performance as an athlete was never up to par. But obviously we're not athletes, so it affects like your output in terms of how much effort you put into your workout, but also it affects whether you do the workout. A lot of times when we're very sleep deprived and we're tired, we don't actually do the workout that we should be doing. We skip it. I often get that when I message clients, oh, we missed you this morning at training. Oh, I didn't sleep, couldn't sleep last night. and it's a common thing that disrupts people's exercise flow and routines. But being active can support sleep. So often you might have noticed in this program when we're doing lots of activity, extra walking and moving your body a lot more than what you're previously used to, you'll probably find that by the end of the day, you're quite tired and you actually sleep better. So that's a positive two-way relationship with exercise. It affects executive functioning. So poor sleep hampers that cognitive process that helps us organize our time, our tasks, solve problems, manage impulses. So again, when we're well rested and we've had good, adequate sleep, we tend to be sharper in the mind. We tend to have more centered, grounded decision making. We, do important things. We don't do less important things. We just manage. We're not as reactive to situations. If you've ever been sleep deprived, like perhaps if you've had kids and you go through that phase when they're little babies, and you go through that sleep deprivation, and what happens, like little things just set you off because you're just so tired. So it definitely has a huge impact on your reactivity to situations and just thinking from a grounded, centered point of view and making better decisions. And having good, adequate sleep is going to help you to stick with the plan that we're trying to do right now. Super, super important. Metabolism. So with consistently less sleep, we're more likely to exhibit decreased insulin sensitivity and increased stress hormones like cortisol. So what does that mean? So when we're not sleeping well, our stress hormone cortisol gets boosted because it's like having that coffee. It's like a pick me up, trying to, artificially whip you into, go. So it's definitely not good for. We'll talk about that in a future training where we talk about stress and the connection between cortisol, stress, and gaining fat tissue. But insulin sensitivity is very important. So when we have decreased insulin sensitivity, which happens, in conditions like diabetes and things like that, where our body just doesn't receive the message of insulin well enough. It's almost like it becomes deaf to the sound, so it doesn't hear it well, and then the body has to produce more insulin to get the same effect. And as we've talked about already, insulin is our primary fat storage hormone. It causes us to store fat and it stops us from burning fat. So we definitely don't want that to happen if we want a healthy metabolism where we're going to be able to pull energy, generate energy in our cells and not store excessive fat and stop our body from burning fat. And of course, lack of sleep, it does increase your risk of developing prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, things like that. I've worked with many clients over the years that have had diabetes, and I've constantly been told by them when they're measuring their sugars and they keep a pretty close eye on things like that, especially if they're taking medications. And every time they always say, when I have a poor sleep, my sugar levels are sky high. So it definitely has an impact on your energy metabolism and your processing of sugar, blood sugar. Alcohol. So there's a common misconception that alcohol helps you get to sleep. Some people are like, I have a couple of glasses of wine and then that'll put me to sleep. Now, there's been a number of studies on this. I've watched a number of documentaries on this as well, where they've had people that they've done that exact experiment on, they've drank alcohol, and what they find is, yes, it puts you to sleep, but it's not restful, restorative sleep. It affects your heart rate, it elevates your heart rate, it elevates stress hormones, it leads to dehydration, and it's almost like you're just unconscious. So it's like you're in a coma, but you're not, you might hear someone snoring really loudly and think, oh, they sound like they're in a really deep sleep, but it's not restorative quality sleep. So we're not only talking about the amount of time that we're sleeping, but we're talking about the quality of that sleep. Super important. Caffeine. So if you are a coffee drinker or you have caffeinated products, a big tip is to have a cutoff point. So generally they say that caffeine has like a half-life of about 6 hours. Again, that's a general statement. We're all different. Some people, my brother-in-law used to have a coffee at 10 at night when we're over there, and he'd go to sleep and he'd claim that he'd be fine getting to sleep. Whereas if I was I don't drink coffee personally. I find that if I ever did, I've had a few cups of coffee in my life and it has a negative impact on my body. My heart rate elevates and I get too jittery. If I had a coffee at night, man, I wouldn't be sleeping at all. So, it's different for different people. But generally, if you are going to have coffee, have it as early in the day as possible. Try not to have like a bit of a cutoff time. So maybe not after lunchtime would be ideal, so that your body has enough time to process that caffeine. So again, it's not going to have an impact on your sleep quality. There's a number of different chronic illnesses linked to chronic insufficient sleep. Depression, anxiety. So if you think about what we talked about, the cognitive function, if you're wired and we know that we're more reactive when we don't sleep well. We're shorter, have a shorter temper, we have less tolerance. So as you can imagine, the state, we've talked a lot about state. So the state that's going to put you in is not going to be a positive mental and emotional state. So it's going to be more conducive to putting us in a negative state, a negative emotional state, a depressive state, a state where we feel more anxious about things. So there is a lot of research on that. Obesity and diabetes, we've mentioned sort of the connections with that. Even heart disease. There's a number of studies that talk about hypertension, high blood pressure, heart attacks, and all sorts of different heart-related conditions that are related to a lack of sleep, stroke. As I've mentioned a few times in previous trainings, our body is a system of many systems. It's a holistic system. And when you study natural functional medicine, which is one of my passions, and I love to listen to experts in that field podcast, and you listen to a doctor that's very knowledgeable in functional medicine, where they're looking for the root cause and they have a very good understanding of how all the systems interact, rather than isolating and just knowing about one body system and having an intricate knowledge of that, but not necessarily knowing how the body, holistically functions. Once you learn about that and you hear someone, very knowledgeable about that talk, you start to realize that everything in the body is tied together. And you can't have one area lacking without it having ripple effects into other areas. And hence why most likely a lot of these chronic illnesses are related to one of the foundational pillars of health, which is sleep. And I guarantee as the years go on, there'll be more and more and more conditions and illnesses that they do research on and discover that there is links to sleep deprivation. So yeah, some other ones that I hadn't mentioned already, which is, I have sort of touched on a bit: brain function, memory loss. We've probably all experienced that you're not as sharp if you haven't slept well. Your memory, you can't think properly, you can't, retrieve information very efficiently when you sort of you get a bit hazy in the mind. Immune system deficiency. So the immune system, it's very, very important to get good quality sleep for our immune system. So when we don't get good quality sleep, you might have had periods in your life where you've perhaps had a work project or something that's affected your sleep, and you just have gone to bed really late, got up really early, and you've done that for a particular period of time, and then you get sick. So that's a direct example of how the immune system is going to be running at a low capacity and not working to its optimal levels, and you're going to be more susceptible to catch things. Fertility, another one, hugely important to have good quality sleep. And lots of different psychiatric conditions are also related to sleep insufficiency. So sleep hygiene, you may or may not have heard of this term. So what it refers to is just the practices and the habits that you have around your sleep time and your general sleep habits. So our body works on a circadian rhythm. So our body works on lots of different rhythms. And one of them is a circadian rhythm, which is a 24-hour cycle, which works in tune with the rise and the set of the sun. As I touched on earlier, when the sun comes up, you'll notice it's a different color. The sun's a different color at different times of day. When it's it's noon and it's straight up overhead, it tends to be more white. When it's morning, it can, often it can be different colors from day to day, but it's a bit more of an orange amber tinge. Same when it goes down, and this affects the hormones in our body. So if you imagine we evolved to be outside, not like we're indoors so much these days. So that has a big impact on our circadian rhythm and how our body interprets light. Through our eyes, it has different glands and like our pineal gland regulates a lot of our sleep and wake hormones. So having a consistent pattern will be very helpful. So trying to go to bed at the same time, trying to wake up at the same time roughly every day is very helpful for allowing your body to get into a rhythmic cycle with that. Our bodies like that regularity and that consistency. And with that, it helps to get into a pattern of releasing the appropriate hormones. So hormones like melatonin. I was horrified to hear. I remember at my daughter's 8th birthday party a number of years ago, I think there was 10 kids. 5 of the kids at an 8-year-old party were supplementing with melatonin to get to sleep. I was like, I couldn't believe it. So melatonin is the hormone that is a natural hormone that our body produces, and it starts to wind us down. So if you imagine, the invention of electricity and the light bulb has had a big impact on our sleep. So if you imagine before electricity or the light bulb was invented, the only sort of light we would have had was maybe a campfire or something like that. And if you've ever been camping, you notice that, you stare at that campfire and it sort of has like a bit of a, it almost sort of lulls you into like a meditation, and you watch the flames and it sort of winds you down. But when we have like bright lights, so imagine like I'm in this room right now, I've got a light straight above me, right above my head. The body gets confused, and especially it's the new lights, the energy saver lights are actually the worst ones for your health because they have more white light spectrums. And when it's straight above you, your body interprets it as midday when the sun's at its highest point. So it does affect your melatonin production. If I go back to that example before, is if you imagine when, during caveman days when we didn't have lights and electricity, and the sun slowly went down. As the sun goes down, our melatonin starts to rise. Our cortisol, which is our go, 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 wake hormone, starts to lower. And cortisol and melatonin have like an inverse relationship. One makes you tired, one makes you awake and ready to go. So when those hormone signals get mixed up by light and other things, then the body doesn't go into that sleepy, tired mode. And melatonin really just helps you get into that sleepy mode. And then there's other hormones that help to, you know, maintain and keep you asleep. Yeah, having a little bit of discipline around that sleep hygiene is really important. Some primary things is, firstly, as I mentioned, establishing a routine, a ritual. And that includes the time that you go to bed, but also the time that you wake up. Being active during the day, trying to get outside and get sunlight. That's very important for, you know, just setting your the rhythms in your body with nature. Our body is tied into nature. We're animals. We're designed to be. We are a part of nature. Often we think human beings think of themselves as separate from nature, but we are intimately tied into the systems and the rhythms of nature. And the more we separate ourselves away from nature, the more you know, yeah, illnesses and dis-ease happens in our bodies. So being active during the day is definitely going to help with that. Staying off devices at night. That is massive. So this is probably the thing that disrupts people's sleep the most. So if you think of it like this, like a television is, you know, normally a number of meters away from you. And, you know, you watch a television or you watch, you know, say a computer, it might be, you know, a meter, half a meter, something away from you, or an iPad's a little bit further away. Phone, you tend to hold it closer because it's smaller. So there's a relationship between how close that device is to your eyes as to how much white light penetrates in and directly affects the hormones in your body. Okay, the melatonin and the cortisol. So your body gets confused when it's getting that white light. It thinks that it's daytime. It thinks that it's the middle of the day and that it should be producing the hormones to keep you awake. It's not slowly winding you down, especially when you're watching things that have, you know, flashing lights, and you know that's the way television is. I watch these YouTube videos that my kids watch. You know, this Mr. Beast. I don't know if anyone's heard of him, but it's like he's like one of the biggest YouTubers in the world. But and, you know, he's got a younger audience. But I watch his videos, and it's like boom, 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 boom. It's one thing to the other, and it's just hyper stimulation. It's like lights are flashing. They don't even, you know, it's not like a video like this where I'm just talking and it's just me in a normal rhythm of life. They're going from this shot to this shot to this shot to this shot, and you can imagine what that does to your brain. It's like a, you know, it's like the slot machines at a casino where it's like, you know, it's spinning, and it's just like your brain is just processing you know, information at a high level, and it's going to be very stimulating to your system. So what you watch at night, how close you have that device to you is very has a big impact on your brain activity and, you know, winding you down or stimulating you up. So I always recommend definitely stay off like computers or phones or tablets and things like that for at least an hour and a half before you go to sleep. I have a on the iPhone you can put like a oh, what do they call it? I think it's called night shift. So it gives it like an amber tinge rather than that that bright white screen. I have mine on 24/7, so because I don't like looking at that white light. I find it quite stimulating. But just doing little things like that. F-Lux, that's another thing I put on my computer and tablets. F.Lux, it's called Lux. and that will put an amber tinge as well. You can set it for time so it does it more at night, but definitely, I do it all the time. I just have it 24/7, but yeah, definitely have it on at night. I would recommend. Um, and not looking at emails and doing things that are stimulating at night, work stuff at night is definitely not a good idea, because it winds you up and it's going to stop that production of melatonin. And as I mentioned with the lights, like, a lot of friends sort of think that we're a bit weird, but at night we don't have many lights on at all. Normally we have like those salt lamps, that Himalayan rock salt lamp, which is like a pinky sort of amber tinge, and that's low. We have a few other lights that are similar to that, and I have like a dawn simulator alarm in the morning, so it's a light that comes on rather than an actual alarm. It has like chirping birds, and that comes in as an orangey tinge light, and that wakes me up. So it's quite like a calm waking up rather than a sort of alarm that's like, just sort of shocks you into wakefulness. But having it low, the light's low, it sort of simulates, like if you imagine your vision, if you're outside, which we evolved it most of our lives outside before we had modern sort of, modern day and age. The sun is low and it has more of an amber tinge when we're getting closer to night, closer to darkness. So that simulates that, and I find it quite helpful. Sunlight in the morning. Oops. Sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. Sunlight in the morning is also really important. Not eating before bed. So a couple of hours before bed. If we go to sleep having just eaten, then it can just not, when you go to bed with a gut full of food, then your body doesn't have the ability to do other processes, and it does disrupt your sleep because it has to put a lot of energy to digesting the food. So definitely give yourself a bit of cut-off time for that, 2 or even 3 hours. Manage stress levels. So do things that are calming, relaxing at night before you go to bed. Have a bit of a routine. Maybe it's just reading a book. Maybe it's having a nice warm bath with some essential oils. Like I know Haley, my wife, she always she'll lay on her back with her legs up on the wall. And she finds that that's quite calming. She gets like a little bit of restless legs sometimes. So she finds that if she does that, just helps to drain that lymphatic fluid down. It's a bit of a relaxation ritual that she has, puts her into a restful state before going to bed. As we mentioned, consistent bedtime, dark room. So I actually sleep with nightshades. So I have like, a band, and it's pitch black dark. If I'm very sensitive to light, that's why I do it. You don't have to do that, but just make sure that your rooms are very dark. You don't want to have lights beaming in because it does affect your sleep cycle. And you can even set like a bit of an alarm, like a little reminder, gentle reminder before bed, like a reverse alarm, they call it. So just like a reminder to, oh, it's 9:30. I want to go to bed by 10. Yep, I've got half an hour. I need to start to wind down. Because some people get sucked into Netflix or different things like that. And those, this is sort of off topic a little bit, but I remember watching this interview with this guy that was talking about, social media and different, things like Netflix and stuff like that. And the CEO of Netflix, he was asked in an interview, what's your biggest competitor? He said, is it, whatever, Amazon or, some of these other companies, competing companies, which you thought would have been his answer. And he said, no, our biggest competitor is sleep and social connection between people. Right? So think about that. So you'll notice over the years, Netflix has gotten pretty clever that if you're watching episodes, it loads the next episode like within, I don't know, 10 seconds or something, before you even have time to find the remote to say, oh, I probably should go to bed. And it's like, oh, bang, the next episode started. They're very clever. They suck you in. And you know, after a little while, you sort of, you know, you lose track of time, and then it can be really late. And then again, you're not going to get good quality sleep. So be careful of that. There's people, you know, companies that are trying to, you know, it's a battle for your attention. So you got to choose where you give your attention. As we said, where focus goes, energy flows. So if we're trying to keep ourselves as healthy as possible, we have to be aware that there are things that are going to try and suck us down little rabbit holes of, yeah, that are going to impact our sleep in this case. So definitely prioritize sleep. I can't overemphasize it. I hope that by watching this presentation, it's opened your eyes a little bit to some of the, you know, some of the impacts that you may not have thought about before. There's, you know, I've just really scratched the surface on this. I've read many books on this topic, and you know, we can go down, you know, whole different pathways, you know, lots of different areas, but I think you can get the message that if you want to level up your life and be the best version of you, sleep needs to be prioritized, and it spills over, has that ripple effect into lots of different areas of your life. So, as always, whenever we learn some new information, the best thing you can do is take some immediate action. So do one small thing, small or big thing, that's going to, you know, just put it into practice, in other words. So perhaps, you know, have a little bit of a reflection and think about if there's something that you can do in your life, something that, you know, something in your ritual, your routine, whether it's, you know, setting some boundaries for device use, or, you know, maybe it's, you know, controlling the light that you have, maybe buying some, you know, like the night shades, if that, you know, tickle your fancy, or getting like an amber salt lamp or something and having that on rather than the big lights. You know, having some sort of restorative, restful practice, doing yoga, meditation before bed, something that you can do that is going to enhance your sleep, because having good quality sleep is a game changer and has a massive, massive flow-on effect into all other aspects of your health. Hope you guys enjoyed this presentation and got some good info. I got a little bit of insight in how important this is.